Dale Kingsmill has revealed herself to be part of the necromantic propaganda machine, suggesting that this vile dark art can be used for good and heroic purposes. But of course, somebody who thinks that a medical journal is the equivalent of the Necronomicon is going to tell you that necromancy is rad actually. As Dale notes in her excellent and evocative video, I can't really argue that necromancy is and always has been represented as pure evil in all of human literature. But what I can do is try to convince you why you might still want to represent necromancy as a corrupted arcane art in your D&D campaign. And why some of the examples of good necromancy that Dale provided in her video may actually be more sinister than they first seem. My name is Byrne, and this is why the Monarch's Factory is actually a necromancer propaganda machine.
Benjamin seems to believe that in order for necromancy to retain an air of awesome, dreadful power in your tabletop RPG campaign, that it has to remain the dominion of bad guys. I'd like him to say that to a simple desert handyman I know, named Jesus.
I love the depiction of death and resurrection in Greek mythology. The idea that the underworld is a literal place that mortals can go and visit is epic, in my opinion. But I think that Dale's example of Asclepius's power to resurrect the dead actually goes to my point that necromancy is a perversion of nature and offensive to the gods. Asclepius is a fantastic healer who plies his medical trade presumably for many years without upsetting a single divinity. Yet the moment he discovers the power of resurrection, Asclepius offends the god of the underworld, Hades, and as a direct result is struck by a thunderbolt from Zeus. This story demonstrates that the power of resurrection was not intended for mortals to claim, not without the god's blessing. Dale does, of course, use other examples of divine resurrection in her video, including Dionysus rescuing his mother and Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead. Dale argues that these two figures are not divine during their acts of resurrection, that divinity is something achieved later, and therefore they are mortals performing resurrections. And that's very debatable, depending on the specific belief system or the version of the story being told. But I don't necessarily disagree with Dale that it's not about a character being divine so much as it's about their connection with the divine that enables them to perform a resurrection. Dale asks, if an apostle ain't a cleric, then I don't know who is. Which was exactly my point in our original video whilst discussing divine resurrections. The apostles were uniquely holy individuals who were chosen by a literal incarnation of God on earth, and through them, God worked miracles. Comparing a cleric to an apostle is how I see them as well. Your party cleric should be one of the most uniquely holy characters in your campaign world. That is why the story of your campaign focuses on them as the main character. They are a prophet of their deity who will change the course of history. But of course, even a cleric doesn't achieve the power of resurrection easily. They grow the strength of their divine magic while proving that they are worthy of using such a power wisely. Or perhaps in your campaign, the cleric simply has not met anyone that their deity wishes to resurrect until they have reached a level when the appropriate spell can be learned. Take Dale's awesome retelling of Ezekiel in the Valley of the Dry Bones as an example of what I'm talking about.
Son of man, these bones are the people of Israel. They say our bones are dried up and our hope is gone. We are cut off. Prophesy to them. Say to them, the sovereign Lord is going to open your graves and bring you up from them.
It's clear that it's Ezekiel's connection with God that enables him to resurrect the bones. It's not a power or a skill that Ezekiel naturally possesses. It is the will of God working through them. But Ben, I hear you ask, typing away in the comments, if resurrection is only possible because of the will of the gods, doesn't that inherently make necromancy good? That's exactly what an evil necromancer wants you to think, and in fact, a villainous necromancer might use this logic to appear as a false prophet in your 5e campaign. Is it God speaking through Ezekiel to raise an army of the living dead? Or could this be an archdemon whispering in the prophet's ear
and corrupting their soul?
Also, resurrecting the dead may be relatively common in Greek mythology and biblical passages, but these sources are clearly not not dark fantasy, and maybe not the atmosphere that you're aiming for with your game. Necromancy in dark fantasy should maintain its sense of existential terror, that something blasphemous has happened long after the act has been performed. And in your D&D campaign, you get to decide. That's what makes tabletop RPG so awesome. Therefore, your attitude towards resurrection and how this ability is achieved should reflect the atmosphere you want your game to have. In my original Necromancy video, I argued that communing with spirits or conjuring spectral servants could be harmful to the soul in question. You are disturbing their rest, forcing them into servitude, and perhaps the experience of being a spirit is torturous in and of itself. Dale refuted this with the story of Odysseus communing with the dead spirit of Tiresias, a wise seer with whom Odysseus seeks counsel. Firstly, and most simply, Odysseus makes a blood sacrifice of 2 sheep to perform his ritual. 2 lives must be ended before Tiresias can be given even a semblance of life for just a few fleeting moments. Those sheep had families, Dale. Necromancy always invokes a vile cost. Secondly, Dale stresses how much the spirits who come to Odysseus want to drink from his blood sacrifice. The spirits aren't upset at being awoken, they are trying to receive the gift of life. Yet, by the description that Dale reads in her video, the souls sound less like grateful petitioners and more like desperate, howling wraiths.
These came swarming around my pit from every direction with inhuman clamor, and green fear took hold of me.
Odysseus is forced to draw his sword and fight the wraiths away so that only Tiresias receives the gift of the blood sacrifice. This includes Odysseus's mother. Imagine witnessing the twisted shade of your own family thrashing to reach a pit of blood like a person drowning. Is that a fate you would want for them? Is that a fate that you would want for yourself? Or would you rather just be left in peace in the underworld? Just because being summoned as a spirit isn't physically painful for whatever that means for a spirit, it doesn't mean that it isn't dreadful. These spirits are clearly being tormented. Dale also points out that Odysseus is the hero of the story, but being a protagonist does not absolve a character of the wickedness of their deeds. And this honestly isn't a problem for your D&D campaign. Heroic characters forced into making ghastly choices is a cornerstone of dark fantasy. Our hero Odysseus is forced to seek aid from the warlock Circe, who is a character of dubious morality herself. Circe instructs Odysseus on how to perform a cruel and profane ritual to disturb and torment the souls of the dead. Yet our hero has no other choice if he wishes to return home. What part of his moral integrity is Odysseus willing to sacrifice to achieve this goal? When I say necromancy is a vile and evil practice, I think some folks might assume that I'm saying that necromancy can only be practiced by evil characters. On the contrary, an altruistic character performing an evil act knowingly can be fantastic character development. Is the man that arrives from Odysseus's journey the same man that left? What secrets haunt him of terrible deeds done to return to his family? Look, it's time to get down to brass tacks, and you're not all going to agree with me, but we can't all be right like me. Necromancy is not healing magic. Healing magic is not necromancy. The word necromancer derives from the ancient Greek language nekros, meaning dead body. Therefore, a necromancer has no power over the living, only the dead. And inversely, a healer has no power over the dead, only the living. I'm gonna turn this back around. A surgeon can stitch flesh and set bone, which regrow and mend themselves over time. Dead muscles and bones do not heal. They simply rot and dry, even if stitched back together. Medicines can eradicate germs, bolster our immune systems, replace deficient vitamins or hormones, or alter our chemical pathways. But medicine has no effect on a cadaver. No healing can take place once bodily function has entirely ceased. I hold magic magical and alchemical healing in the same light. Cure Wounds is simply accelerating the natural healing process to take mere seconds without the need for suitors. Healing Word might be more about mental bolstering, giving you and your allies renewed will to fight on. Lesser Restoration neutralizes poisons and kills diseases, kind of like a medicine. But none of these effects can work on a dead body. I consider Revivify to function more like a resuscitation than an actual resurrection. D&D 5e doesn't have a dedicated healing school of magic. Therefore, healing spells are scattered confusingly across Evocation, Abjuration, Necromancy, and there's even one in Transmutation. Other fantasy worlds do separate healing from necromancy. Skyrim has an entire magic school called Restoration, which includes multiple spells that aggressively target undead, like Turn Undead. Most healing spells specifically do not affect undead in Skyrim, except for a few exceptions that only target undead. But there is no ability to resurrect, conjure, or create undead in the school of Restoration. And in fact, necromancy is often considered a dark and banned art in Skyrim itself, or in the Elder Scrolls lore.
Could you revive him?
Maybe. If I actually practiced black magic. Haven't sunken that low just yet.
In The Witcher, necromancy is a branch of magic that is defined by casting spells on the dead. Yennefer uses it to extract information from a dead man in Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, killing a sacred tree in the process and describing casting the spell.
Imagine putting wriggling cockroaches in your mouth, or swimming in manure. That's more or less how it felt.
It's a banned study of magic by the Brotherhood of Sorcerers because it's proven that the revived dead are always unpredictable and reviving them always involves entirely negative side effects. So even if the purpose of casting the spell wasn't evil or negative in the first place, irrevocably it will lead to evil. Yet healing magic in The Witcher remains the domain of druids and alchemists. It's, I suppose, tied to nature and the natural world in that way, whereas necromancy is a perversion of that. I propose a new 5e school of magic entirely. The Magic School of Clemency is named such because its focus is on spells that are restorative and reduce suffering. It differentiates itself from Abjuration in that it's not a protective shield, but a way to recover from injury. Clemency tends to draw from the power of the divine or the therapeutic magics of the natural world. Spells that would be exclusively from the School of Clemency would be Spare the Dying, because when Spare the Dying is cast, the creature is not yet dead, they've only been mortally wounded. Cure Wounds, Healing Word, Lesser Restoration, and Heal are all obvious spells that would also fall under Clemency. I would also include Revivify, with the understanding that, as we've spoken about just previously, it functions more like a defibrillator to bring someone back from the brink of death. Vampiric Touch and Enervation would both remain as necromancy spells, because they leech life from elsewhere to be able to preserve it. And as a general rule, Clemency spells should never do harm. As somebody commented in the previous necromancy video, using life transference to sacrifice one's own health to save another's is the epitome of noble. Therefore, it certainly doesn't belong in the school of necromancy. I would actually move life transference into being a sanguromantic spell, blood magic. Mechanically, it obviously doesn't quite function the same as Grim Hollow's sanguromancy spells tend to work, but thematically it fits the concept of self-sacrifice to create a magical effect. Speak with Dead would also remain necromantic, knowing that good clerics can still perform vile acts for a good cause, accepting the gravity of their decisions. But I would add it to the general wizard spell list as well, either for my villainous NPCs or necromancer anti-heroes in the party to make use of. It's just such an evocative spell to be available for only 2 classes and a few subclasses. As for actual resurrection spells, such as Raise Dead and True Resurrection, they all belong in the school of Clemency, which might seem surprising at first. But these spells should all be removed from all spell lists and not made available to freely learn or prepare. Instead, only certain cleric subclasses are capable of preparing them, maybe, like the Life Cleric or the Grave Domain. Perhaps a specific quest or task needs to be completed by the cleric as handed down by their deity to be able to unlock the power of preparing resurrection spells. Or maybe you tie these spells to only be available via a class feature such as Divine Intervention. This makes it clear that the actual resurrection is only possible through the will of a god, like in the case of Ezekiel, and not something that the cleric can just casually perform every few days when they feel like it. For necromantic resurrection, I have a new spell, which wizards and warlocks can learn. Create Unlife is a 7th level spell that allows a humanoid creature to be revived as a lich, a mummy, or similar high CR undead monster. Cast on a player character, it may instead commence an undead grim hollow transformation, like the lich transformation. It represents necromancy's ability to forge a facsimile of life, but being utterly incapable of preserving true life. Necromancy plays with the power of the gods. Clemency is the power of the gods. Ultimately, as Dale and I have both said, it really is about the tone and atmosphere you want for your D&D campaign. The intention of framing necromancy as a vile art is to explore the dark fantasy themes of horror, superstition, and corruption. Of course, it's noble to desire to help people preserve life, but what happens when a healer can't let go, and their ambitions move beyond mere clemency? On the other hand, you might want to represent necromancy entirely differently, like in the Ethereal Expanse, where the entire sea is made from the souls of the deceased. The Ethereal Expanse is Ghostfire Gaming's high fantasy setting, maintaining a distinct and dreamlike aesthetic where any genre of adventure could unfold. The Ethereal Expanse setting guide is on Kickstarter right now and includes new character options, including subclasses, etheric spells, and Ghostfire's heritage system for character creation where you can freely choose your starting traits. There's also monsters and lore for GMs, and a robust naval combat rule set that could be admittedly ported into any nautical campaign. Check out the link that's right up here, or it'll be in the description as well. You can, of course, catch Dale and I every week on the #1 podcast in all tabletop RPGs, the Eldritch Lorecast, where we will undoubtedly continue this debate on necromancy. You can find Dale's video and channel right here. You should definitely go check it out. It's incredibly evocative, and subscribe to her channel if you haven't already. Or you can find the video that started it all right here for more ideas on featuring necromancy in your dark fantasy D&D campaign.